Hi, I'm Raymond. You're watching RPAD TV. Thanks for hanging out with us. We have a double video game episode for you today. I have spent 114 hours and 14 minutes playing Final Fantasy Rebirth, while my guest Paul has been playing Rise of the Ronin, which he posted an excellent review on his website. But aside from that, can you give the people up there an update on what's going on the excellent paulsemel.com?
I can, and as always, I made sure to have props.
We love the props.
Couple different things. So this is interesting. This is a science fiction anthology called The Inhumans and Other Stories, a selection of Bengali science fiction.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's 4 science fiction stories, but they're all from one's from 1895, one's from 1913. They're all sort of old school, really old school Bengali writers, none of which have ever appeared in English before. This is the first time. And it's actually part of a series called Radium Age, which weirdly is from MIT Press, as in the Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
Wow. I'm super interested in that.
Yeah. So that I have an interview with the guy who put that together. He edited it and translated it and found the books, and professor, very nice guy.
Xavier?
No, not Xavier. And then I got a lot of good stuff coming up. David Argonoff's novella People's Park, kind of described as being like a punk rock horror, Stranger Things kind of story. So I got an interview with him that's going to run next week. And then also there are a plethora of Sonny Rollins live albums coming out.
Oh, very cool.
One of which is a reissue of his classic A Night at Village Vanguard that Blue Note are doing. And then the other one, which I actually have on me, Freedom... Wait, I can never do this right. Freedom Weaver, which is a collection from his 1959 European tour. I don't know, Raymond, how much you know about this, but a lot of times back in the 50s and 60s, American jazz guys were huge in Europe. And they would go, they were way bigger there than they were here at that point. And they would go and they would do radio shows and concerts would be broadcast on the radio. But because of copyright laws, they would end up actually there'd be official releases over in Europe that the Sonny didn't have anything to do with. And so he's been going through the archives and finding this stuff, getting it remastered and putting out reissues. This is the second one. He did one last year of Holland, some stuff he did in Holland that was really cool.
I was just going to say Amsterdam has a ton of jazz clubs.
Yeah.
Historically, and it's funny that some of them are interspersed in the red light district. So
yeah. So he put out an album about a year ago that was a show he did in Holland, and then a radio show that he did. And this is basically one concert that he did in Switzerland, and then a radio session he did in Sweden, and then some one-off shows. And most of it sounds really, really good. There's a couple of things in there from a couple songs from Germany where it sounds like a copy of a copy of a copy of a cassette somebody borrowed from their older brother. That comes out in a couple weeks, and that will be reviewed on my website.
All of this, I'm interested in all these things. I'm interested in Bengali sci-fi. I don't know if you remember when I was still in LA, there was a Bengali girl that I was quite enamored with. I think you met her at Pactor's party. I brought her to that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
People's Park. Is that an actual place, or is it about a Korean fellow named?
No, it is actually a place. It is actually a real place in Bloomington, Indiana.
Clan country.
Thank you. Because that's the funny thing, because apparently People's Park was a store that Black people opened, and the Klan burned it down, and then it became kind of like a hangout for the skate punk kids.
Oh, wow.
The remains of it. They weren't there because of the Klan.
They weren't skating around with hoods on.
No. They're skate punks, not skinheads. Yeah. And of course, this book is a fictional thing because something happened.
Yes.
Ooh.
And then the Sonny Rollins stuff. As you know, my brother is a jazz musician,
Yeah.
so he has schooled me about a lot of that. All of this is super interesting. Can't wait to learn more about it. And neither can you, which is why you should go to paulsemel.com. The URL is in the Facebook and YouTube description below for your convenience. So please check out this site. Now, back to the topics at hand. We're talking about Final Fantasy Rebirth on my end, talking about Rise of the Ronin. So I will kick things off with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This is the second chapter of a 3-part series of a reimagining to the 1997 original game Final Fantasy VII, originally released on PlayStation. Now, when the first chapter came out, Final Fantasy VII Remake, it almost had a J.J. Abrams Star Trek vibe. Like, it's the characters you know and love, a lot of the major story beats, but one decision like changed a lot of their destinies. So people thought that's the direction this series was taking off in. Not so fast, because in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it kind of, there's like a multiversal aspect to it, which I wasn't expecting. I don't know if people out there were expecting it. If you were, leave a comment. Or if you're not, leave a comment. Just leave a comment. Comments and likes. Apparently, comments and likes are good. And subscriptions don't mean jack all. So you learn something every day with Google's stupid algorithms. But yeah, so this is the second part. You learn there's a multiversal aspect to it. Now, I want to go into a bit about.
I have a question, because this is what I was confused about.
Yes.
So did they basically take Final Fantasy VII, split it into 3 parts, and then expand upon it? Or is it that the first one was a remake of the original game, and that this Rebirth is a sequel, and then there's going to be Revolutions or something, and that's going to be the third one that'll be another sequel?
Kind of neither and kind of both.
Okay.
I mean, it's like, you know how the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, the first movie, is like their origin story, but because the Hulk changed their destiny, he flew in. What was Eric Bana's name in that? So that kind of like
right,
the timeline.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
So
it follows a lot of the same thing that happened in that game, but in different ways. And
right.
Because I remember there being like a whole debate about like something happens in that game, and people are like, don't spoil it for the people who haven't played it. And then other people were like, that was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You can spoil things. Like,
yeah. No, it's I kind of don't know where they're going with it. And I love that about it. I thought it was one way after Remake, but Rebirth changed everything. But there's definitely better writing, better translation, more depth for characters and story. So that is something that I am a huge fan on. But you are still hanging out with Cloud Strife and the Clue. We have from left to right, Cloud, Tifa, Barrett, Aerith, Red 13, and Yuffie, who I always loved that character, but she was kind of shallow in the original, but they gave her, I was really impressed with what they did with her characterization and Barrett's. Like, I really love how deep and interesting these characters got. Now, another game that's related to this is Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII, which came out on the PSP in 2007. That's a prequel to Final Fantasy VII that talks about Zack Fair and the events leading up to the very beginning, literally, of Final Fantasy VII. And that's actually my second favorite game of all time. And they've been using that combat system in Crisis Core and building upon it, trying out in other games. They took it to another level in Remake, and they took it to an even higher level on Rebirth. So it's not the turn-based RPG of the original. There are actually different ways to play it. You can play it as almost like a pseudo turn-based RPG where you can pause and choose your commands and scroll through different characters if you want. Or you can play it as a more modern action adventure game. I love that they have that option. I was actually thinking about you as I was playing this. I'm like, when I switched it on to the action mode, I'm like, oh, Paul would dig this. I'm getting it feels very Dragon Age-y to me. But
Right.
then I switched it back to the more traditional way because that's just what I love. And yeah, the gameplay is just perfect. First comment from the excellent Matthew Freeman, my Star Wars guru, and he should be yours too. You should check out Matthew's Substack where he talks about all kinds of excellent Star Wars stuff. I think it's just matthewfreeman.substack.com. Game plots stick with me less than movie plots because I rarely replay games, but I often rewatch movies. Is it more common than I realize for people to replay games? I don't think for narratively driven games, I don't think it's all that common. But for this one in particular, I would actually suggest replaying it. And I will get to why a little bit later with one of my few complaints about this game. But excellent question and wonderful to see you, Matthew. So gameplay is just about perfect for what I love. It's nerdy RPG stuff. There's the materia system is better, but one of the complaints my excellent friend Peter had about the original game is that there wasn't enough differentiation between the characters. You could pretty much have any character play any role, whether it's, melee or support, just depending on what kind of materia you hook them up with. This game does a much better job making, clear divides between the characters. You have your healers, you have your tanks, you have your melee guys, and some guys that are kind of all arounders. So depending on how you like to play, there will be characters that are for you. So the gameplay is just better and more diverse than the original for me. Some purists might disagree. Now, I love the story of Final Fantasy VII, but not originally. I liked the original game, but it had a pretty bad translation. The story was could be confusing at the time. It was 1997. I was definitely younger and dumber. But they expanded the world with Crisis Core, the game, and Advent Children, the movie. And it just gave it so much more depth and nuance that I came to love the world of Final Fantasy VII. And that continues with Remake and Rebirth. So I love this world. Oh, I love all the world, really. And it's interesting. The ending, I absolutely love the ending, but it's really divisive. Now, to me, it's really just artistic. There are people that, okay, I'm going to get into spoiler territory here because the original came out in 1997. But one of the biggest shocking moments in gaming history was when Sephiroth kills Aerith, who has her back turned to us. I probably should have picked a better screen. I'll go with this one. Now she's still on the side there. Like probably midway through the game, Sephiroth, the big baddie, kills her. And in this, you're not quite sure what happened because there's multiverse stuff going on. There's stuff with the live stream and different colors. Some of the scenes show the live stream in the traditional green, and it's interspersed with scenes where the live stream has like a rainbow glow to it. So there's some shenanigans there where you're watching the same event that's probably taking place in different timelines. For example, there's one timeline where Sephiroth has blood on his sword, but it quickly flashes back to the same scene, but his sword is clean. And that was done intentionally. So you don't know what's going on. And I love how divisive it is because some fans loved it. Some fans hated it. And some fans are like, what is going on? So I like that you don't know and you have to wait for the third chapter for it to all come together. And hopefully I live that long. Unlike it's not like waiting for George R.R. Martin to finish his books.
Wait, when haven't they said when the third one's coming out?
I don't think so, but I imagine they're going for 2027, which would be the original's 30th anniversary. So, and allegedly when the next PlayStation is coming out. I mean, that's all conjecture on my part. I don't know.
Right. Did they do with this game, like what they did with Mass Effect, where like your character and whatnot would carry over into the from the first game to the second?
They did not,
No.
which annoyed some gamers. I messed up starting the game where because I played remake and the expansion pack, and you get bonuses for that. But there's kind of a weird way to get the bonuses. So I started the game without them, got pretty far into it, and then I'm like, oh, I needed to create the save file first, then start the game to get the bonuses. Well, I don't care that much about it.
Right.
You can keep your crappy pieces of materia.
Right.
Another reason I love this game is because I mentioned that Crisis Core is my second favorite game of all time. And some of the scenes here, which again, it's the timey-wimey stuff, because Zack Fair dies at the end of Crisis Core, bringing Cloud to Midgard. But you can play as Zack in this game, and they take music. The main theme of Crisis Core is called The Price of Freedom, and that's used in a bit throughout the game. But just seeing Zack getting to play as him for a little bit, and hearing his music, seeing one of the characters that played a big role in Crisis Core, that just made me go totally fanboy. And especially when you have moments like this where you get to see Zack teaming up with a prime Cloud. Because if you're not familiar with Crisis Core, when Zack is bringing Cloud to Midgard, Cloud is still suffering from being experimented on for 5 years, being in a coma and suffering from Mako poisoning. So he is, he can barely walk. He can't talk. But seeing Cloud at his full powers, teaming up with Zack Fair is just total squee moment for me. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, just the story wise, I loved it as well. I mean, everything is deeper. It's explained better. There's more of characters I love here. There's Barrett over there on the left. In the original game, he was like just kind of there for me. I understood what his function was. He didn't bother me. I didn't dislike him, but it wasn't one of my favorite characters either. But he is written so well, and they go into his backstory so interestingly here that I'm like, oh, Barrett's kind of cool now. And Yuffie, who was always one of my favorites, they gave her so much more depth, and she's just so much more interesting. One of the chapters towards the end of the game, you go through these trials where basically each character has to relive their biggest trauma, and it's really sad. Like this is moving shit. I gotta pause. So I mean, kudos to the writers. So gameplay wise, story wise, absolutely love this game. Now let's get to the complaints, and they're not major, but I could see how this would bother certain people, certain gamers in different ways. It took me 114 hours and 14 minutes to beat the game, but I did a lot of side stuff. There's a card game that you have to play a few times, but you can play more to get more stuff if you want to. And I really enjoyed the card game, and I probably spent at least 10 hours playing that card game alone. But like the original, there's a bunch of mini games. There's this card game, there's Chocobo racing, there's these like arcade style games. One's like a space shooter, one's like a Rock'em Sock'em Robots kind of deal. And you do have to play a little bit to advance. You have to play a little bit of each one to advance. You can play more, and you are rewarded for playing more, but you don't have to. Now, as a gamer, just out of habit, I want to play more because I want the cool stuff. That's just how I play, and most gamers around my age, that's just how they play. I don't know if younger gamers play that way. Maybe they can skip all that stuff without minding. That's entirely possible. I don't know. But you could probably plow through this game doing minimal side questing and all that stuff in 35 hours. But the way I played took me 114 hours. the mini games and some of the environment puzzles are kind of uneven. Some of them, like the card game Queen's Blood, absolutely loved. There's one environmental puzzle towards the end where for some reason you have to throw boxes at objects to activate switches to advance, and the controls are so clunky that it just wasn't enjoyable for me. Another one was like kind of the equivalent of animal soccer. The cameras and controls were just frustrating, and there were times that these mini games would piss me off so much that I just want to stop playing, and I don't think that should ever be the case. I certainly don't think that was the developers' goals, but some of these minis just really pissed me off. One of them is a throwback to the first chapter of this game called Fort Condor, where it's kind of like a simple strategy game but here your characters are shrunken down to mini size and they're sucked into the world of the game.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cute. But again, I didn't need that much of it. And a few of my friends are playing this game and it's interesting. Like, as much as I love Queen's Blood, two of my friends absolutely hate it. I can't wait. Fans are working on an online version of it. I really hope that Square comes out with a mobile version of Queen's Blood, because I would play the hell out of that. But there's too much content. So getting back to Matthew's point, this is one of the rare cases where I should say you should definitely play the game twice. Once play it through quickly, or as quick as 35 hours can be, to get the story, because that's what I'm here for. I'm here for the gameplay and the story, not the mini games and stuff. And then if you want to go back and get all the cool weapons and bonuses and items and be a completionist, then play it a second time and do all the side quests and the intel and stuff. I mean, there's an overwhelming amount of content there, and I think it could intimidate some people. I mean, how would you play that game, Paul, if you knew what you were getting into?
It would depend. If I was okay, are you asking me whether I'm playing? Because if I'm playing for a review and I have to get it done within a certain amount of time,
if you're playing for fun, just
okay, then what I would probably do is I would try the side quests, and invariably some of them wouldn't be interesting to me.
Right.
Like I never get into card games in these kind of things, and I never get into like challenges. Like you have like a jetpack, now fly through the air and in these rings. Like that stuff never interests me.
There are chocobo flying sequences in this game.
Yeah, like that stuff never interests me. Or like things where like Batman's in a room and it's like now you have to beat up 37 Jokers. It's like, okay, like that. I always find that stuff kind of tiresome. But when it comes to like actual side quests and trying to find hidden things, like then I go, there's some eventually I kind of just go, okay, I have no idea how I'm supposed to get up this tree, and forget it. I'm skipping that one. And, but I try to do a lot of the side quests, and, because I feel like especially if you paid money for a game, you want to get your full value out of the game,
Yeah.
And it's like you're talking about like a game that entertained you for 115 minutes or hours rather. Like, I mean, that's great. Like, I don't see the point in maybe the second or third time skipping a lot of that stuff is fine, but like, when you're playing it, like you should try to get everything out of it. Again, like I said, if you pay for it, like if you download a game off of Game Pass or something, and it's not grabbing you, like, yeah, okay, then you can like skip the stuff, but
Carlos has popped in, who says, "Excuse me, sir, there's only 3 Jokers, not 37.
And now you know why I didn't do that challenge in Arkham, whatever it was. The city night
thing.
Origins.
Yes. One of those.
Vacation.
Another complaint that I have is with the mapping system. In the first chapter, it's all in Midgar. So you're in a city, mostly in the underground portion of the city. So there's not a lot of verticality in the environments. It took me a while to get used to Rebirth because now you're in the open world. You know, there's mountains, there's large things. So there are a few times early on where I was following the map to my destination, get close to it, and then like, oh, there's a big fucking mountain in my way. So
Right.
I don't think the map, and there's only one level of zoom. You can go the normal view or zoom in one level. So it didn't communicate verticality well, which could be frustrating. You do get used to it after a while, but that was an adjustment for me. Aside from that, I mean, I do think the review scores are slightly high. This is getting like high 9s and 10s. Personally, I would give it just below a 9. Now that said, this is my favorite game in a while, and I am 99% sure this will be my favorite game until the next and last chapter comes out. What was the name you gave it? Revelation?
Revolutions. Revelation.
I think they're going to go with Requiem.
Requiem. Yeah, I was riffing off the Matrix movies.
No, I mean they are sticking to the RE theme. So you have remake, reboot, regurgitation.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think the next chapter of Final Fantasy VII should be named? Leave your choices in the comments, either live or after this is streamed. I would love to hear your thoughts. I'm going with Requiem because that sounds elegant and it makes sense for what the third chapter will be. Yeah, that's I could talk about this game for hours, but I mean, did anything I say make you more or less interested in playing it?
I mean, based on what you said about the fighting, I wouldn't pay for it because it sounds like a game that like I could just as easily like get bored with as like get into. So, but if it comes on Game Pass, then I'll be like, oh, okay, I'll try that. You know, I am surprised that you didn't think it deserved a 9 because everything you said about it was like it's great, it's so great.
But there are times it pissed me off. Not just annoying, like literally aggravated. Like I feel my blood pressure rising because of the shitty camera and poor controls in some of these mini games.
Right.
And most of them are optional, but some were not. Like the box throwing thing you have to do because that's how you advance in the level. And Final Fantasy Replay. There you go. I love it. And they can put out a beta called Final Fantasy Reject. I don't know. Yeah, there was a box throwing thing that I could have gotten past on one try, but if you destroyed 10 boxes, then you get a special item. So again, it's that gamer mentality. I'm like, well, I got to get the item. Like I can't not get it. And I had to restart that sequence. I want to say at least 15 times before I destroyed the 10 boxes. Now, you know, that kind of gameplay isn't what I enjoy and what I'm great at. I do like puzzles, but not ones with bad cameras and poor controls. So that stuff could have been better. But really though, this is pretty much the perfect game for me. I mean, you have Zack and Cloud. For me, it doesn't get better than that. Like Zack is, although one minor complaint is that I don't dislike the new voice actor, but I really prefer the original one from Crisis Core. I don't know if this is true, but I heard that the original didn't get hired because of union issues, which is kind of bogus in my opinion. Ooh, Final Fantasy Regeneration X. Yes, we could have Cloud doing the crotch chops. That would be funny. I would pay to see that.
That sounds more like what the box set of all 3 games on PlayStation 6 would be called.
Yes.
You know, that comes with like a statue and a soundtrack CD.
Yeah, I kind of regret not buying the super duper special edition with the Sephiroth statue. Because I saw my friends and I'm like, that's cool. I wish I had that like standing next to my desk. Now, did I run through all my screens? I think I did. Did I get to that one?
No.
Or I mistimed it because Tifa decided to turn, look over her shoulder. God damn it. Stay still, Tifa. We looked at this one briefly. And I did get through all of them now. Yay. Ooh. Final Fantasy Revengeance. Did someone else use that in a game? Because that sounds familiar.
There was that Kojima game.
Oh, yeah.
Where he made up some weird word, and it was like it may have been revengeance or something, and everybody was like, "What the hell?
What the hell's a revengeance?"
Yeah.
I guess he is allowed to do that. So, yes, getting back to this question, Matthew, my suggestion would be play it once for the story, and then do all the extra stuff in your second playthrough. Because I do think the story and writing is so good that if you get caught up in mini games, then it feels kind of disjointed and it kind of kills the flow.
I would also point out that you can have a lot of fun with a game if you don't pay attention to the story.
Right.
You know, the story can enhance a game and it can definitely take away, but you know, if you hate the story in a movie, the movie's ruined for you. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Whereas with a game, you can have a lot of fun with a game if you're sitting there skipping the story every 5 seconds. You know what I mean?
So I was actually having a similar conversation with our friend Ron, who I was saying that, you know, there's too much stuff. There's too many mini games. It's kind of killing the flow for me. And this was when I was like only a third of the way through the game. And Ron was like, no, I love that there's so much content to do and, you know, so many things to do, so much content to absorb. Totally legitimate point. But for me, it's like if I go to my favorite steakhouse, they have awesome steak fries. I love them, but that's not why I'm going there, you know? So I'm there for the steak, which for me is the gameplay and the story when it comes to Final Fantasy in particular.
Yeah. Well, there's also the argument that if you ate too many steak fries, you'd get kind of ill and not want to ever eat them again. You know what I mean? Like,
isn't that true of any food?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, you know, if you give somebody a bag of Oreos and they eat the whole thing, they're gonna like be like, oh, I hate Oreos. You know, but if they eat like 3 or 4 or 6, you know, then they're fine. So
it's funny because I was gonna start my second play of the game last night. Well, I did start it, but I didn't get very far because instead I got to the card game and played 3 hours of that instead.
Right.
So that's how much I enjoy it. So please, Square, give me Queen's Blood on iOS. Now let us switch records and talk about Rise of the Ronin. I'm excited for this one from Team Ninja. Paul, give me an overview of this game.
Okay. So Rise of the Ronin is a third-person open world action adventure game set in ancient Japan at the end of the Edo period. And
it's not that ancient.
Well, it's not that ancient, but it's ancient enough where like the most advanced technologies are like rifles.
You know? Right. So it's still like is it the mid 1800s?
Yeah, it's around then. So you still, but you know, it's still the age of the samurai and
right.
the Ronin and whatnot. And the thing is, as a lot of people have been talking about, it's very, very similar to another game because this game is PlayStation published by Sony. It's very similar to another game that Sony did called Ghost of Tsushima. And they are very similar, but the interesting thing is they're also very different, and different enough that if you like one, I think you'll like the other one, but they don't feel redundant unless you played them back to back. Yeah, the comparison that I make is it's kind of like how Dead Space and Resident Evil 4 are very, very similar in approaches and what they're all about, but the settings are so different and things happen are so different that again, you don't feel like you're playing like a clone of, you know, It's not like eating an entire bag of Oreos in one sitting. It's like, it's like, eating steak fries one day and eating Oreos the next day. So,
a healthy, balanced diet.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm all about the healthy and balanced. But it's an interesting game. And the other one of the other things that makes it kind of interesting and different from Ghost of Tsushima is, it's a lot of like hack and slash button mashing fun, but you also have, as I mentioned, a rifle. And you didn't have that in Ghost of Tsushima. And so you can but it's one of these there you go. But it's not okay, it takes a second to reload. It's not like the Revolutionary War kind of thing where it took like 10 minutes to reload.
Right.
But it does take like a minute. And when you're facing off against some guy with like, a sword, you might want to reload a little faster.
See, that's when turn-based strategy would come in handy.
Yes, it would.
Wait, it's my turn. Hold on.
Yeah, hang on. Yeah. See, yeah, you do that jerking off thing. It also, as I mentioned, it's actually set 600 years after Ghost of Tsushima. They're not connected, by the way. That's just the time frame. And so you end up going to like big cities. Again, it's all relative, but like, yeah, you can see there's lots of buildings, and you actually go up on the roof, and you have a grappling hook that you can use to jump up on the roof and also to hurt people with. The other big thing is Ghost of Tsushima was very serious game, and it was very influenced by Akira Kurosawa's samurai movies. In fact, there's actually a Kurosawa mode, which makes it like the black and white, like an old Kurosawa movie, and the dialogue is in Japanese. This game isn't nearly as serious, which is not to say that it's silly or goofy, but more that it's influenced more, I think, by other games that were influenced by Kurosawa than by Kurosawa directly, if you will.
Gotcha.
So, for example, there was one fight I got into with a guy. He had a rifle, and he did this thing, which you've probably seen in other video games, where like he lifted me up, threw me up in the air, and sort of juggled me by shooting me in the stomach. There's times when you fight people who are abnormally large. Kind of like the analogy I use is kind of like the way Kingpin is drawn in the comic books, where like, he's like 8 feet tall and like, right. It's just sort of, right. It's not natural and whatnot. But otherwise they're very, very similar. Like you're running around, you're doing all these cool, like, you have these different weapons that you use. And one of the things I liked about the game, I kind of took this out, is it reminded me of Star Wars Jedi games in that you have these different weapons and they actually do feel different. Like in a lot of games where you're button mashing and you have a sword and you have other, there's one of the like gigantic guys. But as I was saying, like you have these different weapons and they actually do feel different. Like it's not just like, oh, the combos are different. Like they really do feel different. Like you have spears and something called a polearm, which is kind of like a spear, but the blade is much longer.
Right.
And those like feel very different than when you're using a katana or, or a broadsword or something like that.
So I'm guessing each weapon has like different speed and damage output.
Yeah. It's I mean, definitely like the spears and the polearms kind of feel the same, and the swords, like the Japanese swords feel the same, but like it's definitely more diverse than what you normally get. Like if you play like Diablo, for example, and if you have like a hammer, it still kind of does the same thing as a sword. It's just instead of slicing through somebody, you're smashing. Smashing them. Whereas in this game, if you had a hammer, it would work very differently in the moves you do and what effect it has and things like that. I'm trying to think of what other good things. There's a lot to say. I mean, there's a lot to say. It's why I wrote a review of it. But yeah, and there's a lot, like you were talking about, there's being a lot to do in Final Fantasy, there's a lot to do in this game as well. Obviously, you have the missions that help with the story, but there's also all these side quests, and you get attacked at random points while you're walking around. One of the things that they did is, I don't know how familiar, Raymond, you are with the Far Cry games.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things they always do in Far Cry is they have like enemy strongholds, and then you go and you kill everybody in the enemy stronghold, and now you've taken over the stronghold. And it always then cuts to like a video of like night turning to day and the stronghold and people coming in the stronghold and taking it over. And they do that here. I mean, that's been in a lot of games, including Ghost of Tsushima, but it's much more pronounced in this game, much more Far Cry-esque. There's also, as I mentioned, you use the grappling hook in combat, which kind of reminded me of both the Batman games we were talking about earlier and the Spider-Man games that Sony does. For example, there's the usual like explosive barrels that are always red. You can,
Yes.
you can fling those at people. You can grab somebody with it. You can also, as I mentioned, you can get up on the roof and you can actually grab somebody from below, pull them up, and then slice them in pieces. That's one other thing I should point out is this game is super bloody, like really bloody. Like there's just heads popping off and arms, and it reminded me of that old Monty Python sketch, like
Tis a scratch.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was literally that. It was like just gushers of blood. Like Quentin Tarantino would love this game.
So can I ask you what the big picture story is? Like in Final Fantasy VII, you're saving the world from Sephiroth, except when you're playing card games.
Right.
Like,
well, you start off as a twin in this sort of secret organization, and you're going to basically try to help people. But then something terrible happens, and you're still on this mission, but you're also on a mission of revenge. And meanwhile, there's a even larger story because as some people know, and I'm not nearly as familiar with it as I should, Japan was very isolationist at one point.
yes.
And they would not let any kind of foreigners in. And in this game, they've started to, and there's a great deal of debate among the Japanese people about whether this is a good thing, whether it's a bad thing. And so there's a whole lot of that where you're dealing with the Englishmen, and some of them are good and some of them are bad, and then you dealing with like Japanese people who hate these interlopers, and they want Japan, it's kind of MAGA-ish, I guess,
Right.
like they don't want anybody coming in, the whitening of Japan, is kind of like the browning of America. So there's a lot of that going on.
Right.
Although
And that's a big deal. I mean, isn't this game like not coming out in South Korea because of some of the interpretations of history? Like there's some kind of conflict there.
That wouldn't surprise me in the least. I mean, it's made by a Japanese studio, Team Ninja.
Right.
So, there is a history there of, at certain points of Japan and Korea and China not getting along and whatnot. Yeah. I do have to say this though, the story kind of lost me. Like it kind of it didn't really grab me the way obviously the Final Fantasy story grabbed you. And at some point I just kind of was like, all right, whatever. And like just started running around and like, oh, you need me to do this. Okay, cool. You need me to do that. Oh, like, you know what I mean? Like for me, I don't look at video games as a primary storytelling medium. If I want to take in a story, I read a book, I watch a movie, a TV show. I like when games have good stories. It gives me good motivation for what I'm doing. But if a game doesn't have a good story, okay.
Right. I mean, for me, it depends on the genre. Like, I don't care if a fighting game has any kind of story,
Right.
But for an RPG in particular, or an adventure game, then the story is something I very much, want a good one.
Yeah.
And I'm disappointed if it's not good. Whereas if in a fighting game, when like in Street Fighter, they have all these mini stories for each character.
Right.
They're nice. I don't really care if they're good or bad, you know?
Yeah, the only one I ever really cared about was there was a Dead or Alive game where there was like a weird story for every fight,
Yeah.
and they were silly and goofy, and that was the only reason I liked them, because it was so ridiculous. Like, it was almost like a parody of
It was.
like, you know, the stories you get in like more serious fighting games, you know.
Right. And then Itagaki made them all play volleyball for unknown reason. I love that game, by the way.
Yeah.
Dead or Alive beach volleyball or whatever.
Oh yeah. That was fun. Now can I bitch about things in Rise of
Yes,
Ronin? Because there are problems with this game. There are things that I didn't like, and there's some serious problems.
Ooh.
There were the biggest thing for me. Well, one of the big things for me is that blocking. Blocking is a big part of this game, but it's not nearly as easy as it is in other games, especially not Ghost of Tsushima. Now, Ghost of Tsushima, I don't know what they did, but blocking in that game was really intuitive.
Yeah.
And it was really easy to do well. And it's one of the few games where like I found that to be. Blocking is often a really tough thing to do well. And they don't really do it well in this with the default setup. What I noticed is I went into the options menu for accessibility, and there was a thing where you could switch it from where hitting the button normally you would just block for a second, whereas if you hit the button with the accessibility things, it would keep blocking. So if you hit it once, like, your guy would be there. So it gave it much more time to block. It worked way better then. The other thing is, and I'm sure you've run across this in games too, is the difficulty became really uneven at times.
I was going to ask about that, because Team Ninja is known for sometimes punching levels of difficulty.
Yeah. Well, the game has 3 different difficulty settings: easy, normal, and hard. And for the most part, it feels like what you set it for. But there were times when I was playing where, like, I'd be fighting a bunch of guys, and, like, you know, this guy would be normal, this guy would be normal, and then this guy would be really, really tough.
Right.
And it wasn't just like a boss or like one of those really big guys either. It would just be like it would be like one of those things like where, like, I honestly was like, wait, did I do something wrong and like change the difficulty? There was actually one fight in particular with 2 normal sized guys.
Just grunts, not boss fights.
Well, it was a boss fight, but it was so much harder than you know what it reminded me of? I know you're not a huge fan of this game, but in Call of Duty Modern Warfare, there's an infamous level where you're in that area of Russia where they had the atomic power plant failure, and you're basically like trying to hide while like waves and waves of Russian soldiers are coming in. And that game is notoriously tough. That part of that game is notoriously tough. And actually, somebody we know, Garnett Lee, from One Up and other places, he actually asked about that once, and the developers were like, "Yeah, that's like a goof. Like, we didn't mean to do that. Like, there's like a mistake in the programming where no matter what you're on, it suddenly kicks it up to hard, and it's not supposed to." And that's what this felt like. Like, there were times when, like, as I said, like there were times like this one boss battle where it just really felt like they had kicked the difficulty up.
See, when I think
unfairly.
When I think of Team Ninja, I think of Ninja Gaiden,
right?
Which, you know, it had normal mode, which was not easy, and then it had like really, really, really difficult mode, and then it had like go fuck yourself mode.
Right. Yeah.
So I know you've played those games. I mean, does this game seem more accessible than those?
God, it's been so long.
I would say so.
I would say yes. Like, when I was playing it, like, it didn't feel like it was a naturally tough game. Like it didn't feel like Dead Souls or any of that kind of stuff. Or the toughness of Super Meat Boy or something like that.
Gotcha.
It was just every once in a while you would run into somebody and you'd just be like, oh, God. Especially because it's one of those games where when you are down on your luck and you can take a little health thing, but the character takes a split second to do that, which means of course you're open to like getting your guts cut out of you, while you do that. It is decidedly a game where you get hurt a lot, but you're going to get a lot of health packs. They're not packs, but a lot of health things to fix yourself up on. So
I always found like in this screen, are the boxes breakable and are there items in there?
No. Some of the boxes are breakable, but most of them are not, and there's not things in them. But you do loot. There is a lot of looting. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that because that's one thing I liked about this game is there is a lot of looting. You loot from your enemies, and you're constantly getting like new armor and new clothing and new resources and whatnot. But what they did that was really nice is you have your inventory can hold 2,000 items.
Ooh.
So unlike a Borderlands game or a Diablo game where you're constantly running back to town to empty your pockets, you don't have to do that. You can just go when you want to. Now, you're going to want to go because you're going to constantly want to get rid of the stuff, you don't need. And and you can break, you have your choice with certain people, like you can break things down into their components and then use the components to upgrade things and whatnot. But you don't have to.
Right.
And that's one of the things I liked about this is like when I play a Borderlands game, I end up spending, it seems like half my time dealing with my inventory, organizing it, going through it, clicking things to get rid of it, and running back. One thing they wish they had done that they didn't do is you can't mark things as junk, that you don't want them.
Yeah.
Which is too bad. And then go back to town and just sell everything. But on the plus side, unlike a Fallout game, the shopkeepers seem to have a lot of money on hand because nobody ever said to me like, I can't take that. I don't have enough money, which, has happened to me a lot in Fallout,
Inventory management should not be time consuming, or pretty much anything that pulls you out of the game should.
Yeah. But it is. I mean,
Yeah.
in so many, any game that's loot heavy, like the inventory, is a problem. I think we talked, in the show about Diablo. One of the nice things about Diablo was that you could instantly create a portal that would take you back to town. You could sell your stuff and then immediately portal back where you were. But you still had to do that all the time. Like you were still constantly like getting so much stuff, every time you cut down a, group of goblins or whatever, And in this, you could go days without going anywhere near a shopkeep, that's, which is kind of nice. I mean, I kind of basically just went to the shopkeeps like when I was in town for some other reason. So, we should also talk about the cat thing.
The cat thing.
That thing, yes. So first of all, there's a whole bunch of dogs in the game, and you can pet them. Except they're these big, fluffy. I don't know what they are. They look like Shiba Inus, but bigger and fluffier. And when you pet them, you rub their cheeks. It's adorable. But one of the collectibles in the game are cats. There's dozens and dozens of cats everywhere. And so you're constantly like, you were talking about like, side quests. You're constantly like climbing towers and going on, going back routes and whatnot and finding these cats. And the nice thing is all of the collectibles, because there's other collectibles in the game as well, pay off there's a reward. It's not just, you're not just collecting them to collect them. But the weird thing is every single time you pick up the cat, you pick up the cat looks at you and then immediately jumps out of your arm and runs away. Like, there's not one cat that's appreciative of you taking the time to climb a tower, 30 stories or whatever, 3 stories, risking life and limb, and then you get up there and, like, at the very least, the cat should be like, okay, you can pet me.
See, what I love about this is that you interrupt your quest for revenge to find a cat.
Yeah, you do.
Like, it's same as save the world or play some cards, right?
Yeah. It kind of in that aspect, and some other ones remind me also of the Witcher, the last Witcher game, where like you didn't really want to fast travel everywhere, because everywhere you went there was there's a treasure chest over there. Okay. Oh, there's another treasure chest. Okay. Oh, now there's like a random combat encounter. Okay. Like, right. There's a lot to do in the game, and a lot of it is fun. So,
but it still seems like you had some frustrations with it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the difficulty was a problem. The blocking could have been better. There's a lot of things that, like, I just, didn't like. I mean, there's my usual complaint about some of the type being very, very small,
right.
And, if you don't sit right in front of your TV, like your mom told you not to do.
There was actually some of the default settings in Rebirth were strange. Like, by default, the music is too loud to the point where sometimes you can't hear the dialogue.
Right.
Like, you can turn it down.
That is the common complaint that I have about video game music. I tend to turn the music off anyway. But like, especially in games where I feel like it ruins the mood. Like for example, like, I don't know why anybody has the music on when they play like a Fallout. Because the whole point of the game is you're wandering a
wasteland.
A wasteland.
Yeah.
Like, why? I mean, I know why people do it. I know some people don't want that freaky feeling. Right. They're not comfortable with that. It's kind of the same reason why you'll watch a horror movie, and right in the most intense scene, someone will make a joke.
Right.
Because some people can't handle the intensity, and that's fine.
You need to break the tension. Some people need that. I get it. Yeah, totally.
But yeah, there is like a weird thing in video games I've noticed where, like, you always have to kind of go in and turn down at the very least, turn it down a little bit. What's aggravating for me is when you can't turn it off.
Right.
Like there's games that I've gotten where it's like you can turn it down from like 10 to 1. But then the music is still playing, but it's almost worse because it's like distant in the background, and you're like, oh, why can't I just turn this off?
Right. For Rebirth, you have volume settings for both the music and the dialogue.
Right.
You also have the option for subtitles. I didn't check if there were. I think there's Japanese dialogue available, and you can do that with English subtitles.
Right.
But I like the American voice acting cast a lot. Everyone did really well. One odd thing was the default map was not very good, but in the settings you can switch it so you always have an upper right corner map. I'm like, that should have been the default. This is much
right. But at least they gave you the option. That's one thing I will say about modern gaming is usually in AAA gaming, they give you way more options for things like that, like where you can go in and you can change the controls, and you can remap the buttons and change all these things. And now, of course, as I mentioned earlier, there's all these accessibility things for people. Like, I've looked at some of those things, and it's like, now there's colorblind mode, but there's multiple kinds of colorblind. So there's multiple kinds of, right. There's different, it's not just that you can get the captions. You can get the captions with the person's name on it. You can get the captions of the person's name, and the name is a different color than the caption. How dark or not dark do you want the background to be? Right. And it's funny because I always think it's weird when you have that kind of stuff, but then the tutorial messages are like tiny, like type, and you're like, why? So
You know what Japanese RPGs should have? I know you're not supposed to say Japanese RPGs anymore, but they're literally RPGs from Japan, which in my head makes them better. So, but they can get a little weird and with the story, and sometimes the translations aren't the best. Maybe they should have like explain this to me like I'm a 5-year-old mode. That could
yeah.
work. That's a money idea there. So we are going to wrap things up shortly. Wanted to take some time if anyone has any questions for Paul about Rise of the Ronin and questions for me about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, while we quickly talk about some trailers that hit today. I guess Beetlejuice was a big one. I was excited for that.
Yep. Beetlejuice. I mean, they didn't really tell us anything,
Right.
except it looked like Michael Keaton was really old. So I'm wondering if like that's going to be sort of an element of it. Like, you've left me like out of the picture for so long. Look what it did to me, kind of thing.
Also, because Michael Keaton is actually really old.
Right, but but it looked like they made him look old.
Right.
Like I actually just watched the Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and like he looks old in that movie. And yes, I know he's old, but they didn't have to make him look that. Like he looks weathered, and that's what I thought of like Beetlejuice.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's a ghost, so he's not supposed to age. Maybe, I don't know.
That's what made me think of it, because I'm like, why he shouldn't be aging. That's why I think it's an element where he's going to show up and be like, look what you fucking people did to me. You trapped me in this stupid, diorama for 30 years. Look at how it aged me. Oh, just kidding. Like,
Jenna Ortega seems like the perfect choice for this movie.
It almost seems like typecasting in a weird way,
It's going to be you or Aubrey Plaza for all the droll deadpan roles.
Right. But I guess it's supposed to be Winona Ryder's daughter. So Aubrey wouldn't really work for that.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine Aubrey in that movie, because she would just be like,
what the fuck is this?
Fuck you.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like Jenna would at least kind of go with it. So
there were some House of the Dragon trailers that dropped today.
Right.
They're doing a clever thing where they dropped a green trailer and a black trailer, depending on which house you support or follow.
Yeah. Although you kind of have to watch both. So
you have to watch both, but they're encouraging people to hit like on the one they like better. So it's really clever. I think it's great that they're doing that.
Yeah.
I've already chosen a side, and I will not reveal my allegiances at this time. So,
right.
But I definitely favor one of the sides, even though I know how it ends. That's
right.
Kind of weird. What was the other one? 1943. What did you think of that?
Oh, that game looks really interesting. It's been a while since we've had a really good Marvel game. I'm hoping this is it. As I said to you earlier, my concern is that it's going to be a live service co-op game, and I don't want it to be. I want it to be a single player game where sometimes you're playing as Captain America and sometimes you're playing as Black Panther. I'm guessing the other two characters are going to be Namor and the original Human Torch. I don't know. But I think they've said there's going to be more characters, and I'm hoping that that's what it is. And you know me, any chance I have to punch a Nazi in the face, I will take it, whether it's virtual or,
Speaking of which, do you hate your religion, Paul? Because Trump said there are some Jewish people out there that hate their religion. Yeah, I shouldn't get into that. I don't want sorry. I don't want to get him started either. Because he will.
Just don't get me started on that guy. I mean,
turned red at the drop of his name.
Can we talk about the Acolyte trailer? That's much more interesting. That's the one we didn't remember.
Yes, I wanted to talk to Matthew about that, since he is my Star Wars master.
Right. That looks really, really interesting and really cool. I mean, first of all, Carrie-Anne Moss is a Jedi.
Right.
Like, come on. You talk about typecasting.
Yeah. Well, the dude from Squid Games is the lead.
Right.
Manny Jacinto he plays the smuggler dude. So I'm very proud to see a Filipino in the cast.
Right.
People know him, I think, from The Good Place is probably his
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
popular
Which is
thing.
interesting because he was such a dumbass in that show. And so, like, the first time I see him in the Acolyte, I'm going to be like, say something stupid. Say something stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Say something about Star Trek. What? Oh, no. And he's not going to be that at all.
Right. But it'd be funny if he shows up. He's like, "Hey guys, live long and prosper."
And then I also really like Amanda. Oh, I can't remember Steinberg. I think her name is. She's the bad girl in this.
Right.
Who at first I didn't recognize, and like because she's got like a face mask, and I'm like,
right, yeah, she's like stole the Winter Soldier's mask.
Yeah, I was like, wait, is COVID hitting Coruscant? What? And then all of a sudden, like you're like, oh, she's like a badass ninja lady.
So she is presumably the titular acolyte. We don't know, but
we don't
that's
know
what it looks like.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm excited for this. Like, this is like Jedis in their full glory. I love their robes because they don't have that boring brown shit that all the Jedis
right.
wear.
Yeah. It's well, the somebody who works on the show said that the thing about the original Skywalker saga was that it was a story of good and evil, but it was also kind of a story of the establishment versus the anti-establishment. And he said, and this is kind of going to be that too, except the establishment are the Jedi.
Right.
And so, and one of the interesting things, and people hate this, of course, but one of the interesting things that comes up sometimes in the High Republic books is that not everybody loves the Jedi.
Right.
Not everybody loves the Republic. There's actually, I don't know if it'll play a part in the Acolyte show, but one of the elements of the High Republic books and comics is that there's this group who feel that the Jedi should be wiped out. There's actually two of them. There's one that are like these people who just hate the Jedi, but there's this other group, almost like a cult, who think that the Jedi are wrong for using the Force, that the Force should be free, that nobody should use the Force to, like, pick up an apple or whatever. That if you do that, you're bad. That
right, you're defying nature or something.
Yeah, basically, like if you use the Force to move your roommate out of his 1-bedroom apartment, that you've hurt the Force, and that the Force will hurt back.
I'm just saying, if I were a Jedi, I would never touch a doorknob for the rest of my life.
Right? Yeah, because you just go like that.
Yeah, like all these dumb things. It's like when in Harry Potter, when the older Weasley twins finally got to teleport, they were like teleporting to different floors of their house.
Right.
They're pissing off their mothers. But I'm excited for this. The setting, the Jedi have these like white and gold robes that look really dope. Whereas in the movies we've seen them in, it's like, why are you all have like your Tatooine gear on?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing. Even in the prequels, like, you kind of got a sense of what the Republic was like, but it wasn't like I guess it kind of was the glory days, but not really. Like, and this is going to be like the glory days of the Jedi and the Republic,
right?
Now,
the Acolyte takes place 100 years before what's Rey's first
before
movie, The Force Awakens.
No, it's 100 years before the prequels.
Before the prequels. Okay, so there are some characters that will presumably be alive that we know, like Yoda would still be alive.
Yoda is the only one who's turned up in the books. And even in that context, he sometimes hasn't been around. Like, he's not in every book. Like, he's not in every book. He's not in every comic. Like, he's only turned up every once in a while. But he's a much younger Yoda, obviously, than we see. But nobody else. Like, you don't see Chewbacca. There's no R2-D2. There's no C-3PO.
Right, but even more, like, Maz Kanata would still be alive. Huyang, the teacher, the lightsaber instructor droid that we saw in Ahsoka would be around.
Possibly.
My don't know when he was still. Do you expect or even want to see some of these characters, or do you want the Acolyte to be its own thing?
I wouldn't mind seeing Yoda.
YODA Yoda, as Weird Al said.
Yes. But I don't need them to shoehorn in people just to kind of connect it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I don't need a scene where somebody's building R2D2.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need them to go to Maz Kanata's cantina. If they do, because there's a reason for it, great.
Fine, right.
But I don't need them to just be like, hey, we're going to go to this cantina and get a burger. Like,
I forgot I had those on. Did you see the
thing
appear? Yeah. Damn it. No. See.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, but that's the thing. I don't need stunt casting. You know, if it works for the story, great. I mean, I think Maz Kanata was mentioned in one of the books, but I don't remember the context.
Yeah. I mean, my preference is I rather not see anybody that we know. I rather have it stand out on its own.
Yeah, I mean, the thing, if you're doing a story about the Jedi and the Jedi Council, and Yoda's around,
you kind of need him. Yeah,
you kind of have to have him. You can't just be like, where's Yoda? Oh, he's on spring break. He'll be back in 3 years. You know what I mean? Like that would almost seem weird unto itself as well. If you just missed Yoda.
Would Plo Koon still would be alive? Because they live for a few hundred years, those whatever the hell race he is.
I think maybe nobody's mentioned him, but yeah, he could be around.
Interesting. We have a question from the excellent Zach Morris. What did you two think of the recent episodes of Invincible? I have not caught tonight's episode, but I loved last week's. I just love this show. I mean, it's one of the best comic book adaptations that I've seen, and the voice casting is tremendous. Stephen Yeun plays Invincible, fantastic actor. J.K. Simmons plays his dad. The cast is just loaded. What's her face from? Now I have to IMDb this. It's important. Jason Mantzoukas, who's one of my favorite comedic actors, has a small role in it. Sandra Oh plays Invincible's mom.
Oh.
Walt Goggins is in it. He's always good. He plays Cecil. Jillian Jacobs, that's who I was thinking of. She plays Adam Eve. Love her. Yeah. Zachary Quinto, of course, plays Robot. But only when he's Robot, when he has the body he manufactured and looks like a little boy, another actor plays him. So I love him. Melise Zhao. I mean, yeah, this is a really impressive cast. I love that it's mostly faithful to the comics, explains things in a way that makes more sense for a real-time show where you can't flip back and look at panels and try to make sense of it. And they got the violence right. It is bloody, as Rise of the Ronin is. There's some messed up things that happen in this show. But yeah, I'm super happy with it so far. And I'm looking forward to watching tonight's episode, but I'm hungry, so I will do that first. But I think that is going to be a wrap for this episode. Next week, hopefully, we will be talking about, I want to do an episode that you're probably not interested in, but I think I'm going to get Mac for this one. But I want to watch the new Roadhouse with Jake Gyllenhaal, because it looks hilarious to me. Like this, Conor McGregor looks like a crappy actor, so I need to watch him. But it also has Diana Melchior from Suicide Squad, and she was in Guardians 3, who is just, I will watch her do anything on screen.
There's people who are saying that Roadhouse is going to be for dudes what Barbie was for women.
That would be unfortunate. Like, Barbie is inspirational for men and women. It's just a thoughtful, smart movie. Yeah. Roadhouse looks like dumb shit.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that there are dumb guy movies, but they can.
Right.
I don't think they should it should be like the equivalent of what Barbie does for women. That sounds
Yeah,
insane
I
to me.
I don't think we need that really. I don't think we
Yeah.
need to encourage men to be assholes these days, especially
Yes.
not, like Andrew
But
Tate or something.
he plays
Um,
a nice guy fighter. Like they I think in the trailer, one of the guys he beats up, he's like, "Yeah, dude," he like talks all like Mr. Rogers, and then he beats the hell out of you. Really interesting guy.
yeah.
And then you see him with a broken arm there.
I wonder if it's gonna have that incredibly weird line that was in the first one, where the guy threatens Dalton by saying, "I used to fuck guys like you in prison."
Yes.
Like,
Like,
I always wonder, like, how does Dalton not just sit there and go like,
wait,
"Wait, what?
yeah. That is
Is
a
that supposed to
strange,
be a threat, or are you telling me you're gay?"
like now I just want to leave.
Like,
I feel
yeah,
uncomfortable.
you have issues. I'm gonna go.
Like you could take the bar. I'm not interested in doing any of this now.
Yeah.
But I forgot how dashing Sam Elliott was back then too. Just looking at
Oh, yeah.
footage from the original Roadhouse.
Yeah, he had that John Bon Jovi hair, but it was gray and
Yeah, I'm like, well, look at this suave motherfucker right here, to quote Jason Mewes.
yeah.
But yeah, the original Roadhouse was just dumb, stupid fun with, for ladies, it had the very handsome Patrick Swayze. For dudes, hetero dudes, it had the very sexy Kelly Lynch. Is that
Oh,
who
yeah.
it was? Yeah.
Yeah, Kelly Lynch.
And then for everyone, Sammy Elliott was just awesome.
Yep.
So, and now we have Jake Gyllenhaal, Daniela Melchior, and Conor McGregor. So this is going to be weird. It's on Amazon Prime direct to streaming. So we might check that out. There's something I might possibly do with some music from a very famous video game sci-fi shooter franchise. And there are more games that I want to talk about. Mac is playing Helldivers too. I want
Right.
to learn more about that because I know very little about that game, but it's apparently one of the most massive things of the year. So
Yeah.
I need to learn about this. And I'd rather hear about it from Mac than play it myself. So guys, thank you for watching. Again, please leave a funny comment. Limericks are always welcome. Apparently subscribing doesn't do jack, so whatever for that. And thank you for watching RPAD TV. We will see you next time. Take care for now.